Continue from Abuja, the nation's capital. I am Benny Adams, your guide. Good to have you join us at this time, and it's that time we bring you up to speed with happenings in the world of business. The telecommunications and information services sector in Nigeria in the first quarter of 2023 delivered a huge 2.503 trillion in terms of financial value contribution to the nation's gross domestic product, GDP, representing 14.13%. Figures released by the National Bureau of Statistics showed that the sector recorded a 4.3% increase from its performance in the last quarter of 2022, when it recorded 13.55%. When compared on a year-on-year basis, the growth showed positive progression from 12.94% in the first quarter of 2022 to the 2023 figure of 14.13%, which is an approximate growth by 9.19%. The report says Nigerian telecom industry has continued its show of positive outlook, which is credited to the innovative and predictable telecom regulatory environment promoted and implemented by the Nigerian Communications Commission. Now, the Revenue Mobilization Allocation and Fiscal Commission has reiterated its support for the recent fuel subsidy removal announced by President Bola Ahmed Tinubu during his inaugural address, describing the decision as long overdue and a major challenge to the economic growth and development of the country. Chairman of the Commission, Mohammed Bello Shehu, in a statement said the Commission's position is premised on the fact that the continued payment of humongous amounts to a privileged few in the name of subsidy was a major drain on the nation's scarce resources, as NNPCL, one of the major sources of revenue to the Federation account, had since stopped contributing to the national purse due to the fuel subsidy regime, which was characterized by opaqueness and other ambiguities. The chairman described the removal of fuel subsidy as a major masterstroke that broke the jinx, stating emphatically that it was the appropriate step in the right direction. And now, fuel subsidy was a contentious issue for several years in Nigeria, with some calling for its removal and others advocating for its continuation. And President Bola Ahmed Tinubu put an end to the debate by removing it as soon as he assumed office as president. More than 1 week after the subsidy removal came renewed debate about the subsidy's impact on the Nigerian economy, as Nigerians have had to pay more than 500 naira per litre in the country. I have in the studio a management consultant and economist, Mr. Fabian Agore, to discuss the economics of the fuel subsidy removal. It is a pleasure to have you in our studio, Mr. Agore.
Thank you very much, Mr. Adams.
Good. How will the fuel subsidy removal affect prices of goods and services? I'm asking this because anytime we have had increase in pump price of PMS, the reaction has been increase in commodities in the market. Then we had minimal increases in this pump price, but now we're talking about 200% or more increase in the price of pump price of the PMS, courtesy the removal of the fuel subsidy. Is this affecting? Is it going to affect? What's the scenario like?
As it is currently, the removal of fuel subsidy has caused an inflation that is above 23% at the moment. So there is high inflation in terms of services and foodstuff especially. And that is affecting the livelihood of Nigerians. As much as I totally agree with the removal of fuel subsidy, I think that the government should have at least put some palliatives in place to reduce the suffering of Nigerians. As at right now, foodstuff are very expensive that the ordinary Nigerians are unable to afford 3 square meals. And then, of course, you would know that the moment fuel subsidy is removed, what we would have in Nigeria is hike in transportation costs. Now, imagine someone who receives a salary of 50,000 naira per month, and then that individual's transport for the month is bordering around 40,000 naira. Then how do you expect someone that receives 50,000 per month to survive? And that is the situation we're faced with at the moment.
Okay, Mr. Faber, let me pause your thoughts at this moment. Actually, when you mentioned it's actually difficult for some Nigerians to afford 3 square meals, I was like, it seems the previous administration prepared us for this moment when President Mahmoud Buhari then would say, produce what you eat and eat what you produce, and encourage Nigerians to have gardens around the house, which is to say, in times like this, or at times like this, when you have such difficulty, there's just something to fall back to. While you're talking about some incentives could have been put on ground before the removal of the subsidy, I think government at this moment is doing something side by side. While the removal is on one hand, the interventions are coming, though we've not seen them outrightly yet. But the conversations with Labour and the government now is Labour is advocating for an increase of minimum wage of 200,000 naira. How visible is that?
Well, I don't think Labour is asking for too much, because if you do the maths correctly, given the current exchange rates, you will see that the 200,000 naira is not even up to $300. In other words, if a Nigerian is receiving 200,000 naira per month, that individual will be living on less than $10 per day. And for me, I don't think that is really high. I think the government should figure a way to pay that amount, or even pay a higher amount if it's possible. Because Nigerians deserve to live well. We are all producing country, and if for nothing, our citizens who work for the government should live well. I can also tell you critically that most small businesses or mid-sized businesses cannot even pay their staff. Say, for instance, a secretary, 200,000 naira per month. So how do we expect that secretary to live on maybe 100,000 per month, which is way less than $5 per day? So the $200 Labour is asking for is not out of place. The president should consider it and possibly approve it, or even improve on it with other benefits. I want to also say that you mentioned that the government is putting in place certain measures to, more or less reduce the impact of the removal of subsidy. Exactly.
And I also remind you that some states are beginning to reduce the working days. Some are providing some sort of transportation. Some have announced some sort of minimum wage.
Okay,
yes.
Okay. I would say yes. I like the idea that some states are removing, reducing the amount of days they work physically in the office. In other words, they work remotely for 2 days, and 3 days they work in the office. Right, that's not a bad idea. But I also want to ask, what is the government putting in place with regards to reducing cost of moving agro products from the farms to the consumers? Because if we must look at this clearly, we shouldn't just look at transportation in terms of moving people from their homes to offices. We have to look at moving food produce from the farms to the markets.
Exactly.
Because that is one aspect where Nigerians spend a lot of their money. They have to feed. You have no choice than to eat. If you don't eat, you can't go to work. You can't even work at home if you don't eat. So I think the government should look at some plan in line with providing transportation to move agro-produce from farms to markets to reduce the cost of food in Nigeria.
Okay, you just suggested one way that you think government should go. What other measures, palliatives, interventions do you think should be coming at this particular point in time, both at the federal level as well as the subnationals?
Critically, I think if you look at how fuel, petrol, affects inflation, you will see that it mostly impacts it in the area of transportation. Right, foodstuff increases because transport fare has gone up, and then individuals will have to transport to their offices. So a better measure to actually curb the inflation as well as reduce the burden on Nigerians should be to create a transport system that possibly use gas, or create a system, a transport company. For instance, we used to have this Abuja mass transit.
Okay.
We don't see these buses anywhere anymore. Imagine if there was the Abuja mass transit, just like you have the BRT in Lagos, and they retain the same price in terms of transportation like they used to carry before the removal of the subsidy. That will reduce the burden of the subsidy on ordinary Nigerians. Now, you must know that the people who will suffer the most with regards to this removal of subsidy are the ordinary Nigerians. The middle class would not be too impacted by this removal of subsidy, because the middle class can easily, adjust their lifestyle. For instance, I have a luxury car that I drive, and right now I'm beginning to think of buying a smaller car.
A smaller one that consumes less fuel.
Exactly, because my full tank right now is 54,000 naira, as against 20,000 naira, in fact, less than 20,000 naira before.
Some SUVs can go as high as 80,000.
Exactly.
Even up to 90,000
exactly.
to get a full tank filled.
Exactly. So I mean, the middle class can find a way to, adjust their living standard, and then the wealthy, of course, we know this will not impact them in any way. So it is really the masses that the government should come up with a transport system, both for moving, and I want to emphasize this both now because I really have to emphasize this, both for moving farm produce to the markets and then for moving individuals to businesses and back to their homes.
Okay, one strong reason for the fuel subsidy removal is that it would free up resources for other sectors of the economy. What are those sectors that you think need a financial intervention at this time to get to wrap up the progress needed to grow Nigeria from where it is today economically to the next level, perhaps, if you borrow that word?
Critically, I think if you ask me, I would ask the president to focus on energy, on power. If we can reduce, if we can create more power where we have constant electricity across Nigeria, that would improve on our businesses. And then the second area I want the government to focus on is the agro sector, right? Because if we must go into manufacturing, now let's say we have constant power supply, I can set up a manufacturing firm and I don't have raw materials to manufacture. How then can I create jobs? How then can I help boost the economy of Nigeria? So the government must look at these two directions. One, you've got to provide constant electricity, give us constant electricity across Nigeria, and then also come up with a mixed economic policy that would help to boost our agri sector. Because food is an essential commodity. Apart from food, the agro sector is what actually boosts manufacturing that will create jobs. And if we must boost our economy, then we have to create more jobs.
I can get to follow up on the issue of power, which you mentioned, if it is available, is going to go a long way in helping wrap up economic development. If you heard the president in his inauguration speech, he mentioned how states can now be supported to produce power, not just generate, but also transmit and distribute. What is the capacity of these states at this level? Let's take, for instance, Niger State has got all that it takes to produce power to actually feed the whole country. What's the capacity at this level? What do you think government can do to help power generation in that state, as well as other sources of energy, talking about solar and wind?
I like the fact that President Muhammad Buhari, before he left office, signed, into law that states now have the power to produce and generate electricity and also distribute, as against being strictly in the purview of the federal government. Right. So I think a lot of state governors should take advantage of this, because this is a way of generating revenue for the states. And generating power and distributing power is not rocket science. It's like plug and play. It's like buying a TV and plugging it to power, and that's how it works. There are power plants today that you can bring that uses gas. There are power plants that uses water, like the dam.
Yeah, the hydro
is pretty expensive. But let us even focus on the ones that use gas and coal. State governors can generate power and sell power, because again, if you get a PPP, right, because some of the state governors will say, oh, we don't have money to finance that project. But if you have a PPP, power is needed. Power is a source of revenue for every government. So if you have a PPP arrangement, for instance, I'm the governor of my state, which is Delta State, I'm going to make power a priority. I'm going to get a PPP, set up a plant that will produce for the whole of Delta, and then sell across the entire Niger Delta. Talking about Bayelsa, Edo, Rivers. That is, if they don't have such a project. I would look at the state that don't have, and based on that, I will create an extra power generation system that will generate money for my state, apart from the money that I'm going to generate for my state. And of course, what that would do for my state is that it's going to boost the economy of my state, because a lot of manufacturers will want cheap energy and constant energy to be able to manufacture their produce.
So it's not just the availability of energy. It should also be cheap for affordability.
Matter of fact, I'll tell you, the moment that the states begin to set up their power regeneration plants, and then, of course, the distribution is already there, so you don't necessarily have to create a new grid. The grid already exists. What the challenge we have in Nigeria currently is the challenge of generation. We don't generate enough power, which is why they ration power across the country. Right. So if my state governor,
but again, I think that challenge is kind of on season and off season. This time around, you hear our challenge is generation. The next you hear it is distribution. Well, wherever the challenge is, we hope that this is a time that everything will be fixed. Thank you so very much, Fabian Agore, for sharing your thoughts with us at this particular point in time. This is a conversation we'll continue to have going forward. Thank you.
Thank you.
Still on the subsidy removal, farmers in Nigeria have appealed to the federal government to consider their plight while negotiating and providing palliative to cushion the effect of fuel subsidy removal. The farmers, under the umbrella of commodity associations, pledge support government policies and programs towards boosting the country's food production. Musa Baba Aliu reports.
Relating to subsidy removal and measures to cushion its impacts have been on the front burner under the present administration. Negotiations between labor leaders and trade union organizations are being intensified to ensure the support of Nigerians for the initiative by the federal government and make a positive way forward. But farmers believe that they also have a crucial role to play, considering the amount of fuel needed in food production and processing value chain daily.
The withdrawal of the subsidy, even the discussions ongoing, farmers are not on the table. It's only the same urban-based farmers, and then whatever palliatives are likely to come will go straight to them.
Apart from the request for palliative, they also appealed for the release of funds for 2023 wet season farming activities.
The much celebrated Anchor program has ceased, and the farmers are left to their own designs. And then, of course, like we said, the devastating flood has robbed them of even the little that they could have had, from their small efforts, through their little savings and whatever they could scavenge. Now another rain is here.
There is also appeal on the need for government to review and improve on the central bank Anchor borrowers program.
As of today, a bag of fertilizer is 50,000, and most of the small-scale women farmers at the rural areas, they can't afford that.
President Bola Ahmed Tinubu during his inauguration said enabling environment will be provided to farmers to scale up food production and poverty eradication in rural areas. Musa Baba Aliyu.
And now, the National Senior Citizens Center says, as a young person, you have no reason being afraid of old age. And for the senior citizens, no need to worry, as respite has come. This is as the center continues to evolve new ways of ensuring better life for all through the establishment of cooperatives for the young and old as well, for easy access to funds and capacity building.
That you are retired does not mean that you don't have something to offer. But the cooperative now also includes, the younger generation, and so that it is an older person centered, but it's community focused.
The center has reached out to the small and medium scale enterprises agencies.
We will give a certain percentage to take care of senior citizens.
At this stage now that we have the confidence that we have these partners that can go with us, so we are mobilizing all our senior citizens.
And now, oil prices posted their second straight weekly loss as prices continued to fall on Friday over concerns about demand from China and due to skepticism over the United States and Iran striking a nuclear deal. Brent crude futures dropped 26 cents to $75.70 a barrel, while the U.S. West Texas Intermediate crude futures eased 22 cents, also a drop of 0.3% to $70.94. Commodity analysts say oil prices are expected to stay in a range of about $3 above and below $70 for the WTI in the near term. Both benchmarks slid by around $1 on Thursday, rebounding from their earlier losses of more than $3 after the U.S. and Iran both denied a report by the Middle East eye that they were close to a nuclear deal. On that note, let's see how other commodities are trading on the global market. Next is the global market update with Bosede Abel.
Marginally lower at the end of a choppy week of uncertain global sentiment. DAX dipped by 0.20%, FTSE 0.25%, and CAC 40 also depreciated by 0.18%. Asia markets traded mostly higher after the S&P 500 closed at a new high for 2023, and the Dow Jones Industrial Average saw a third straight day of gains. Mainland Chinese markets were mixed, with the Shanghai Composite up 0.55%, almost recouping all its losses this week. Hang Seng Index 0.47%, and the Nikkei also rose 1.97% at 32,265.17. U.S. stock futures were flat Friday after the S&P 500 notched its highest close for 2023 as investors looked ahead to new inflation data set for release next week, along with the Federal Reserve's latest policy announcement. Dow Jones Industrial Average futures fell by 86 points or 0.25%. S&P 500 futures dipped just 0.10%, while Nasdaq 100 futures rose 0.04%. Most African stocks closed negative, like South Africa, Namibia, Nairobi, and Tunisia, while Ghana GSE Composite closed marginally positive. Bosede Abel, Business Express.
Thank you, Basire. And back home, the equities market all-share index depreciated by 55,930.97 basis points this Friday. Investors exchanged 574.6 million shares, valued at 30.4 billion naira in 6,595 deals. FCMB, Access Corporation and Jopol Oil led activity chart in terms of volume of traded shares. This is where we end this edition of Business Express. We value your feedback, so keep the comments, observations, and suggestions coming. Be also informed that our previous episodes are available on YouTube on NTA's channel. Business Express returns next week. Do have a wonderful weekend ahead.